Hi guys, welcome back to Letters from Lockdown. Chad has been in the book of Ephesians. I get to do Ephesians chapter 5. The way I see Ephesians 5 is that God's given us a few challenges, a few encouragements, and we're doing pretty good, and then he says,
now it's time to kick it in the high gear. Drop and give me 50.
He starts out in chapter 1 and verse 5 by saying, be imitators of God because you are his dearly loved children. This is a tall order. In Philippians, Paul says at one point, what you've seen in me put into practice. That's a little easier because Paul's a human and we can follow his strengths and his weaknesses. But in this case, we're supposed to follow God himself. That's a big deal.
Follow me.
The question is, what does that mean? What does it mean for me to be like God because God has made me his child? Well, I think most of us think it means we just have to be a nice person.
He seems like a nice guy.
He seems like a nice guy.
A lot of times this is what we say. Well, if we're a Christian, we're just supposed to be a little nicer than everybody else. I don't think that's quite where he's getting at here. But then he says, among you there must not be even a hint of sexual immorality. So he's upping the ante here, right? It's not just be like God by being a nice person or a compassionate person. He actually says, I want you to speak and think differently than the rest of this culture. He says, not even a hint.
Or not even a little bit.
No. He doesn't say don't be sexually immoral. He says not even a hint of sexual immorality or impurity or greed. These are improper for God's people. And then, unless we think we can just get away with things by joking around, he says, nor should there be obscenity, foolish talk, or coarse joking, which are out of place for God's people. And here's what I find interesting, because Paul wrote this years and years and years ago, and he wrote it to a very highly sexualized culture, which is very, very similar to our culture today. My question is always, what have we become comfortable with? Where have we let the goalposts move? Where we might say, for example, well, I know I'm doing this and it's not right, but at least I'm not doing this, which is what everyone else seems to be doing. Because our society has gotten so extreme, we're quite comfortable with more than a hint of sexual immorality. God says that's not who you are.
You are more than what you have become.
And I think that's interesting because he's not saying don't do this because it's bad for you. He's not even saying don't do it just because it's wrong. He says, I've turned you into something completely different. You are now my child. And when you look like me, if you're a child of the light, is what he says, we are able to live as children of light. Now, a lot of times we think when God gives us these kinds of instructions that he's just sitting there angry at us. You know, he's just mad at us.
You're a scum between my toes.
It almost sounds like God's out looking for us, like he's trying to catch us doing something wrong. Because it says, don't have anything to do with deeds of darkness. Things that people tend to do at night, in the dark, because they don't want to get caught, because they don't want to be ashamed. And he says, everything exposed by the light becomes visible. Now for him, he says the light is Christ. The question is God trying to shame us when he exposes our sin? And I don't think that's true, because he says here, wake up, sleeper, rise from the dead, and Christ will shine in you. This is a crucial, crucial difference. God is not exposing our sin to shame us. He exposes our sin so we can see it clearly, so that we can be healed and live a better life. That's his whole emphasis. That's his whole goal for us.
That's right, he can be taught.
So our job is not to live foolishly or unwisely, according to Ephesians chapter 5. We have to understand what God's will is. And in verse 10 of this chapter, he says, find out what pleases the Lord. So what is my goal? What is my focus? I want to be just like God. He tells me I'm able to be like him, and I'm going to be all the better for it. Thanks, guys. We'll see you later.
Wake up!